This is going to be an introduction to artificial intelligence, what it is, what it's about. AI is literally everywhere, and it's probably been here a little bit longer than you realize, to be honest. From things like your phone giving you directions to Netflix magically knowing what show that you want to watch next, right? In this lesson, we're going to keep things really simple and just understand what AI actually is, how it learns, and why it's kind of a big deal. So let's dive right in. So, what is AI? In my opinion, at its core, AI just means computers doing stuff that humans normally do with our brains, right? Cognitive abilities, kind of performing actions like humans do, right? This could be talking and listening, right? We talk to other humans. AI can, in the form of chatbots or translation apps, or even Siri talking back to us, can simulate those same actions that we do with other humans, right? Seeing and recognizing stuff, right? You see your friend down the street and you're like, oh, hey, what's up, Bill? AI can actually do that too in the form of facial recognition. This is still a form of AI. It can figure stuff out, right? Sorting customer messages, routing support tickets automatically. Again, things that humans do. It requires cognitive ability. AI can also do those things. And then the one that people are probably most familiar with is creating stuff from scratch, like writing emails, generating images, or even music nowadays, which is absolutely crazy. So AI takes messy data and turns it into useful actions or fresh ideas, saving us from boring tasks and giving us more freedom to do all the cooler stuff that we want to do. Now, there's different types of AI, and we're going to talk about pretty much the four different types of kind of broad generalized ideas of the types of AI there are out there. We have narrow AI, we have predictive AI, we have generative AI, and then we have general AI. And these come with different levels of complexity as we go along. So, narrow AI is something like Siri, where it does one thing really well, right? It just kind of queries a database of information that it has and comes back and asks you or answers your question or tells you the weather or something like that, right? So it has a very narrow scope of what it can do. And an example of how it's narrow in the case of Siri is you'll ask it stuff sometimes and it'll be like, oh, I found this on the web, right? So it doesn't actually know that piece of information. It just knows somewhere out there in the interwebs, it does know that, right? So narrow AI is built to master one specific job. Examples you use daily would be spam email filters to keep your email box clean, voice assistants like Alexa, like I was just talking about, or Siri, Amazon or Netflix recommendations, right? So it can only do one thing. It can just recommend videos to you. Why it's popular is most AI around us today fits this category because it's simple, effective, and focused. Next, we'll look at predictive AI. And what this is basically AI taking a bunch of data that it knows and kind of predicting or guessing the future based on that data. And we'll talk about more about this in the future with things like vector database stores and RAG and how it kind of gets to that point of predicting the future, but it can do it fairly accurately depending on the use case. So predictive AI is just a fancy term for pattern recognition. It looks at past data to guess what might happen next, right? So we feed it tons of data of past examples. It learns from those patterns and historical data. Then it identifies trends and correlations, and AI finds relationships in that data, and it'll make predictions about future events based on what you feed it, which is kind of like your crystal ball. Kind of cheesy, but whatever, right? So some real world examples might be businesses predicting how much inventory to stock before the holidays. Amazon does this. Banks guessing whether or not you'll pay back the loan on time, which is basically like the automated version of a credit score. Predicting maintenance needs before machines break down, and then spotting like early this signs of disease outbreaks in like healthcare and stuff like that. So generally, predictive AI helps businesses or people get ahead of the game by saving time, saving money, and then future headaches. So we can focus on different stuff that cannot be automated. Next, we're going to talk about generative AI, which is probably one of the ones that most people correlate to what AI is, but still going back to the original statement of AI is doing something that humans can do, right? We have all these creative people. In this case, I wrote your creative friend who has a lot of ideas, maybe the artist, maybe the poet and stuff like that, where, you'll go ask them, hey, can you draw me a picture of a toy barn or something, right? And then maybe they're kind enough to go write it for you. Generative AI does the same thing, just in a text-based form, right? You can ask it, via chatbot or, ChatGPT or any of the large language models that have image generation capabilities. But this type of AI actually, creates stuff. You give it the prompt, like asking ChatGPT to write an email or DALL-E to make a picture, and it spits out original content, right? Something that probably hasn't been written before, but it uses all this data and all these models in the back end to combine what it thinks that you need based on what you ask it to do. Right? Just like you ask a friend to write a poem for you and you'll give them, criteria. Same thing with this. Under the hood, it's just learned tons of examples and tries to piece together something that fits the vibe of what your prompt was. What it looks like nowadays, it's like completely changing the way creative work gets done. We do it faster, easier, and to some people it might be more fun, right? So what that looks like is text generation, ChatGPT handling blog posts, brainstorming ideas, or even like coding basics. We'll get into the coding stuff later because it's growing rapidly, but still coding, it knows a lot of snippets, right? It doesn't know large code bases yet. I think we'll get there in the future, probably the next maybe 2 to 5 years, but right now it's really good at like little snippets, helping you do exactly what you ask it for. Like I mentioned a minute ago, we have image generation, DALL-E, Midjourney, creating graphics from sample text descriptions. And then we have code assistants, right? AI assistants like GitHub Copilot, writing snippets of code so you don't have to. You just ask it, hey, write this function that concatenates these two strings, and it'll do it for you. And then finally in the list of like general AI types will be the general AI, right? Which is kind of like the sci-fi future. You can think of this as like your classic movie AI. Robots think and feel and reason just like humans. But this is all kind of theoretical right now. It's not, as of the recording of this video at least, it's not actualized yet. So no Terminator vibes just yet. This is way harder than it sounds because right now AI is more of, it does do some reasoning, but it's predictive reasoning based on rule sets, right? Based on what it already knows out there. And it doesn't have common sense reasoning yet, right? It's just based on a bunch of rules and what it thinks it's supposed to do next based on all the data that's already out there, right? Stuff like this will push us to consider like ethics and safety, right? If you're an end of world thinker, maybe this could be a bad thing. I think it'd be cool in the future. I think it will be the future, right? We'll have robots living in our house doing our dishes for us. Like I think that's 100% going to be a thing within the next 20 years or so. So how does AI actually learn? AI systems learn new things by adjusting internal parameters, often called weights, and sometimes you'll see this in the OpenAI platform, not ChatGPT, but like the inner workings, like it's like platform.openai.com or something. But they do that through exposure to data and then feedback. During training, when we tell it, hey, don't ever do this again, then it's like, oh, okay, I'm not gonna do that again because X, Y, Z, whatever reason you gave it, right? AI makes predictions on those inputs, measures the error between the predictions and the true answers via a loss function. It's kind of getting deep into the weeds, but it uses optimization algorithms like gradient descent to tweak those weights to reduce the error overall over many iterations, right? So someone actually did something like this where they were trying to train the AI that 2 plus 2 was 5, and they had to go through so many different iterations of saying, hey, 2 plus 2 is 5. What is 2 plus 2? And it said 4, right? Because 2 plus 2 is 4, but he had to go through like, I can't remember how many prompts he said it was. It was like 90 something prompts. And it was finally at the end of it, within the same contextual window, he asked at the end, hey, what's 2 plus 2? And it finally said 5. Bad example. Don't ever do that. Don't ever give it data that's bad, because why would you do that? It's just menacing. Obviously, it's not going to train itself. And then we go into ours and say, hey, what's 2 plus 2? And it say 5, right? So this is actually a good example of, just because one person said that 2 plus 2 is 5, it still knows the majority of the data is still 4. So it's kind of a good example there, right? So as it processes more data, it gradually generalizes patterns from that training data, allowing it to make more accurate predictions and decisions on new and unseen inputs, right? So if that one person said 2 plus 2 equals 5, but then just say 10 million people, 20, 30, 50, 100 million people started saying 2 plus 2 is 5, you could probably over time convince the AI that 2 plus 2 is actually 5. Again, that'll never happen, but theoretically you could do that, right? AI systems have three kind of core learning methods. You have supervised learning, which is what we give it with labeled examples and stuff like that, and it kind of logs those automatically. And then we have supervised learning for finding hidden structures on its own, and then reinforcement learning through trial and error, right? So if it errors out on its own and you tell it like, hey, this wasn't the sauce, it'll be like, oh, okay, that's an error case, and it won't kind of suggest that again. Sometimes it gets in loops, and it's really optimistic, right? So right now, AI is super optimistic in and of itself, by itself, right? If you don't ask it to not be optimistic, it's always going to say this is the way, whether it is or not, especially in coding, right? So in general, it collects data, it cleans up the mess. We teach the model, or some external resource teaches the model. We test and tune. Never put anything out into production that you haven't tested, that exactly the kind of aura that it's going to be producing results, right? If it's like an email or even a code snippet, if you're generating that dynamically, like you never want to be surprised at the type of language it's using or the type of like vibe it's letting off, right? So that's our responsibility to test and tune, right? And so just like us, AI gets rusty without practice. So if you leave it alone and you don't tell it what you want or the kind of like vibe that you're looking for, it will revert back to its base state. So always give it, in the case of building AI agents and AI workflows, we always want to give it regular data to keep it fresh and so it stays sharp, right? AI learning is kind of like teaching someone a new skill. The cool thing is you don't need to do deep math skills. It's just basic idea of good data, smart training, and regular checkups just to make sure everything is still outputting the same way that you're expecting it to. Lastly, not a lot of people talk about this, and I think it's actually very important. It's the stuff that we have to watch out for. And people don't know, like when you give the context window of any of these platforms, if it's not self-hosted, like if you go to whatever app it is.com and you type in information, like it is going to log that somewhere. So like privacy right now is honestly a big issue, right? So don't give it API keys, don't give it your passwords to stuff. Will they use it maliciously? Probably not. Probably not. But if there was a data breach or something, like all that's out there and you could get massively screwed, right? There was a point, and I'm not leaning one way or the other. I'm just going to go over here to bias and fairness. AI learns from human data, and humans aren't perfect, right? Garbage in, garbage out. There was a point in the candidacy for 2024 election where you would ask it to say something good about one president and it would, and you would ask it to say something good about another president and it wouldn't unless you forced it to, right? So it's like always be careful of what you're listening to so that you're not being fed a bias of the owners of the platform, right? Because use it responsibly. Ethics is another big thing. Right now we're big into like facial generation and making images look like other people. And so things like deep fakes and surveillance apps are massive risks, right? So we have to stay responsible and thoughtful about how we use AI and to not abuse it for the wrong things. The other thing we need to watch out for, and this is why you're probably learning this, is job shifting. AI will 1000% automate a ton of jobs, and but it will also create new opportunities, right? So I think of it like the Industrial Revolution or things of that nature, where it's like, okay, these assembly line workers were put out of a job based on having machines do it for them, right? And they were all pissed because they were losing their jobs and they were mad at the government and this, that, the other, mad at the companies. But the people who weren't left without a job were the ones that learned how to do maintenance on those machinery or things of that nature, right? So this is why you're learning how to do AI right now, is so you're not left in the dust without a job in the future, right? AI is super awesome, but there are some important concerns we have to think about, right? Next steps is to start using AI, right? Understand the basics of what AI can and can't do. Build something small, like a task that you hate doing. For me, it was an email cleaner upper. Basically, I had 100, like, well, not 100, I had like 2,000 emails that were untagged and categorized. So I built a small agent, told it what to do, kind of gave it outline, an idea of how I wanted them categorized, and had it polling every 5 minutes so that anytime a new email would come in, it would read it, categorize it, left it unread, make it read, just depending on what it was, right? So it cleaned up my email inbox, something that I could have paid someone to do or done myself that would have taken hours, right? Test and adjust it, right? Track if it's actually saving you time or improving quality, or just like I did. It would have taken me hours to clean up my inbox. So this does it automatically every day, multiple times a day on autopilot. And then also, like, stay curious, right? So AI currently is evolving very rapidly, and one could feel quite a good deal of anxiety feeling left behind. My encouragement would be, don't always focus on like the shiny new object in general. Focus on the things that are working for you, working for businesses, hone in on those things, but also, stay curious, keep a pulse on what's going on, learn new technologies as they come along if you have the bandwidth, but do not stress yourself out. The key stuff to remember is AI is just software that learns, right? It helps us do stuff faster and smarter and gives us the ability to do more manual stuff that requires actual human interaction, right? The real world AI types right now are narrow, predictive, generative, or general sometime in the future. And then the basics of building AIs in the cycle would be collect data, train it, use it, adjust, repeat, right? If you forget everything else, remember those things.